I want to pivot to talk a little bit about Erik Lindbergh, who you're going to hear from next. A lot of people might have a hard time talking about and working on projects that are rooted in the past and planning for the future, but that would not be the Erik Lindbergh, who is extraordinarily energetic, extraordinarily accomplished. He's a pilot, a multimedia sculptor, and a furniture maker, an outdoor adventurer with his own YouTube channel. You ought to check it out if you want to get your heart rate up. That's why I have the watch. And he is the chairman of the Lindbergh Foundation. Tonight, he's our keynote speaker. I would like to please call him up so he can speak to us a little bit about all of those things from the past to the future and a little bit of the present.
Come fly with me, let's fly away. If you can use some exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay. Fly with me, let's fly.
Well, thank you. It is an extraordinary honor to be here among old friends and the Pan Am family. I would love to talk about electric aircraft. My personal company is doing great with electric aircraft, really changing the way we move around the planet. Oh! Another? I think I've been laid. Okay, I would love to talk about electric aircraft. My company is doing great. We are enabling the advanced air mobility industry, which is changing the way we move around the planet. But I don't have enough time. So you can pay attention to VerdeGoAero.com. But what I want to do is take you on a little journey. And that journey starts with my personal Pan Am experiences. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Lindbergh Foundation. Very briefly, I have several Lindbergh Foundation board members here. If you'll stand up very quickly, Tom Lee and Mikhail Kiva. Thank you for your work on the foundation, working on the 100th anniversary. It is such a pleasure to try to use that history to create a brilliant future for our children and their children. But let me tell you about my experience on Pan Am as a kid. Every few years, we would fly to Hawaii. My mom would embarrass us by wrinkling her nose all too publicly at the offenders in the smoking section. Remember that? We would converge with cousins and visiting my grandparents on Maui, snorkeling, black sand beaches, and the inevitable sunburns. I remember my dad swimming with me, hanging onto his shoulders, as we swam into the Lizard Lady's Cave. This was a pool on a creek that ran below, not Juan Tripp, but Sam Pryor's property near Kipahulu on Maui. Sam was very high up the food chain at Pan Am. Did any of you know Sam Pryor? He was pretty, okay, you know of him. Well, I'll keep talking. He was the reason why my grandfather discovered this remote paradise. Sam and Mary Tay eventually sold my grandparents a small piece of property on the edge of theirs, and they built a little house overlooking the ocean. Whew. Who knew this could, maybe it's delays. Getting late is making me emotional. Sam, according to family lore, was a CIA agent. And that might be why he always carried a pistol. I wonder if that was common back then, and I wonder if this is how the Pan Am TV series got its plot line. Were you all spies? At any rate, he regaled us of being treed regularly by wild boars while hiking with his dogs in Hawaii, and his dogs would get torn up until he could get a shot off and either kill or scare the pig away. The greatest thing about Sam was that he kept monkeys. Any of you keep monkeys? What's wrong with you? Some of them swung around in large cages outside, while some of them, the ones that didn't bite so much, were allowed into their house. And they would climb on top of our heads and pull our hair and play with us. It was magical to be a kid in Hawaii in the Prior's house. Somebody got bit by a little white monkey. I think its name was Keiki. Somebody in my family was always getting bit, or stung by a centipede, or falling out of a tree while gathering papayas. We were adventuresome, let's put it that way. A little bit more about that later. Several of Sam's monkeys are buried in the Kipuhulu Church next to Sam and Mary Tay. Yeah, and today my cousin is the caretaker of the Kipuhulu Church, and they could use your donation. Also, it's a nonprofit, if you should go visit, as many people do, to see my grandfather's grave and Sam and Mary Tay's and their monkeys. So, now we come to the extraordinary thing that happened to me when I was a 20-year-old starving college kid, living on a tight budget, and I heard about a trip being offered to my family because we were Lindberghs, a free trip to Hawaii and the Philippines beyond with an open-ended ticket when it was all done. This was the Pan Am China Clipper 2 50th anniversary trip. Wow. Our parents' generation cautiously said, no, we don't want to do that. And there was something about not wanting to support the Marcos regime in the Philippines, which was in the news for all the wrong reasons, I guess. But they somehow miraculously passed on the invitation to the grandchildren. And 4 of us said yes. Then my eldest brother asked Jeff Krendler. How many of you knew Jeff? Yeah, okay. Jeff was our point of contact and chief wrangler. My oldest brother asked Jeff if he could bring his fiancée. Yes was the answer. Could you believe that? A free trip and his fiancée. I wasn't engaged at the time, but I asked if my fiancée could come. Yes was the answer. And my girlfriend was in. Not wanting to miss out, my other brother asked if his fiancée could come and invited his best friend Dennis's sister. Never mind that they had never dated. So, sorry, I have to read it because it's this is the first time I've told this story. It was a free trip, right? Get as much as you could. And it was Pan Am. So my little brother, being sensible, 18, he was a freshman in college, he asked if his college roommate Dave could come. And Jeff said yes. How awesome is that? So there were 8 of us. But this created a dilemma for my older brother, who invited his best friend's sister just because, whatever, it was a free trip or something. So then he went back to Jeff and asked if Dennis could come, and yes was the answer. Could you believe it? So 9 of us created this incredibly auspicious start on this trip, representing the Lindbergh family in a sort of nefarious way. So what happened? The day we left Seattle, there was an epic snowstorm, the biggest one in 30 years, and the airport shut down. So we mobilized, okay, how are we going to do this? We rented cars, or we borrowed cars, and we drove to Portland, which had a better schedule. We rebooked. We spent the night on the floor, on the carpet, staring at the ceiling, if we slept at all. And we left Portland a little late. When we landed, you know what? I have slides for this. Hold on. Can we go backwards? There's the snowstorm. That was the China Clipper, sorry. So anyway, will it advance with me now? Because I'll remember. I'm not seeing it, so. Okay, horrendous snowstorm. We get to San Francisco. Can we make this not run as a slideshow? Awesome. We landed just in time to see the China Clipper taking off for Hawaii without us. But wait, it gets better. Oh my gosh. So we get there just in time to go for a quick swim and go to sleep so we could get up in the morning and take off. And we hadn't really met anyone on the trip at this point. So we loaded onto the plane in sensible fashion, sat down with the talkative but normal-seeming group. But as soon as we rotated on takeoff from Hawaii, all the passengers stood up and started cheering, and things were flying around. It was a party on wheels. And these were old people. I couldn't believe it. It was extraordinary. Oh my gosh. It was an instant party, and this was a big eye-opener. I realized I want to fly Pan Am more often. So it turns out we were on the first 747 to land on Wake Island. An extraordinary, just a tiny dot that was a fierce contested island in World War II. Someone on the air base got up on air stairs, someone in the base there, and took this photo of us. Just an amazing experience. And earlier, a cute stewardess, as they called them, come on, one more, there we go, was hoisted up and posed in the engine nacelle on the airport. This is a different photo I found on the internet. Don't tell anyone. But for real, I didn't know you could do that, and that the engines would take that kind of weight and so forth. It was just, no, that's not what I meant. It was extraordinary and eye-opening for me. And then we flew to Midway Island. And the thing I remember about Midway was that there are all these liaison albatross called Goonie birds. And they were flying everywhere. They were nesting everywhere. They were just everywhere. Midway Island was known as the Goonie bird island. And we had this great tour around the island, and then we got back into the plane. We're ready to take off and fly to, I think, Guam at that point. And we sat on the runway with the engines revved up, waiting. We waited for several minutes, and the pilot said, "We're waiting for a hole in the Goonie birds." And all of a sudden, they here it goes. They let off the brakes, and they slammed it to the firewall, and we were pinned back in our seats, and we took off, and we went straight up. It was extraordinary. So anyway, yes, the crazy Goonie birds. We also got to hang out with James Michener, who obviously wrote tons of books. I had read Centennial at that point. And his wife, and the greatest thing about James and his wife was that they were not pretentious at all. They were super friendly, and they called each other Cookie, which was very endearing and super warm and welcoming characters. So remember Jeff Krindler. He's on many occasions remarked that we were sort of an adventuresome family. I think he was being very polite. This was after my brother paid less and less attention to his best friend's sister, fiancée, and more attention to the voluptuous Pan Am stewardess who was flirting generously with him. Yes, Jeff thought we were a sort of a interesting bunch. We also got to the Philippines and rode in a motorcade of, I'm 20 years old. We're riding in a motorcade of Mercedes-Benz limos with drivers with machine guns in their hands to visit the palace, where we were entertained by Imelda Marcos amidst priceless works of art in the palace. Life-size jade busts, mother-of-pearl tables, and pictures of Ronald and Nancy Reagan on every wall. You remember the times. We did not see shoes. That came out in the news later. Then they ushered us into a room for a group audience with Ferdinand Marcos, who started slow and rambling and a little disjointed, but he gained steam, and he started mentioning that my grandfather had approached him about conserving the endangered tamaraw and the monkey-eating eagle, which my grandfather was lobbying that he save by setting aside parks in the Philippines. He did that all over the world. So thank you for your work with the boat company, Hunter. That is, it's a hero's journey to try to make sure that we maintain our quality of life here on the planet. So Marcos, to his credit, gained steam and ended with a rousing sort of stump speech to us that only a politician with panache could pull off. So it was very interesting to see, and I have to wonder if that was part of his, decline as a leader, but he obviously still had it. Imelda and Ferdinand were very interested in our questions about the Tisadai tribe. This was a Stone Age tribe that was featured by National Geographic with my grandfather visiting them. He was extraordinarily interested in studying primitive human beings in the absence of technology because he was curious about the essence of humanity. And this was happening at the same time that the Apollo 13 program was in trouble and going around the moon. And so he was getting helicopter flights out by the government to go check the news and check on Jim Lovell and Jack Schweikert and so forth, and witnessing through these reports the pinnacle of technology as we saved the astronauts after they made the loop around the moon with Apollo 13. So that was kind of an extraordinary juxtaposition, and both Jim Lovell and Apollo 8 astronaut Bill Anders, who just recently passed away up in the San Juans, had long letters that they received from my grandfather about his explorations into the balance of nature and technology, this pinnacle of technology that these astronauts experienced, and then the absence of that, and our need to balance that with preservation of the ecosphere. Those conversations and letters eventually led to the foundation of the Lindbergh Foundation at the Explorers Club. But let me finish my story about the Philippines. Even our exit was an adventure. So the whole trip was over and everybody sort of dispersed, and we went to the airport on the day of our departure, and we were going to fly to Singapore because we had open-ended tickets, and a couple of us had a week to go, and my brother stayed out for months. And my adventuresome brother even found his bride, different from the other two, in New Zealand. So our tickets had been canceled. We went to the airport. Apparently you needed to reconfirm 24 hours before the flight. We didn't know that. We were just college students. So we were like, what do we do? And we went back to the hotel, and we didn't have a room. And luckily, we had met the Minister of Tourism, the Philippines. And one of my brothers called him and said, hey, we're stuck here, and blah, blah, blah. And he scored us rooms at the hotel, so we stayed another night. The next day, we were to go to the Pan Am offices and get our tickets and leave on the next day's flight. And so we staged everything the next day in the Manila Hotel. I think I have a picture. And this is important. Notice the color of the furniture in the picture. We gathered. We had all our furniture. What are those things? Bags. We had all our baggage staged, and two of us ran down the street a block and a half or 2 blocks to the Pan Am office to get the tickets. We waited around until they got, and we were nervous because they were unscrewing the pictures off of the wall. And we felt like, oh, Pan Am's pulling out. We're going to be left here forever. So there was this eerie feeling there. And finally, at the last minute, they issued us the tickets. We got them, and there, lots of paper and so forth. We ran back to the Manila hotel, threw all the bags into the shuttle, jumped in, and left for the airport with just about enough time to make the flight. We get about 2 miles out, and Dennis, thank God, my brother invited Dennis, counted the bags. We were short one bag. Which bag? Oh no, the carpet bag, which looked like it was sided with carpet. The color of those chairs. It blended right in, and nobody grabbed the bag. So at that moment, that was my girlfriend's bag. I said, okay, we're getting out. We got out. I said, we'll see you in Singapore. We jumped out into the median in the street, on this busy street in Manila, and the door shut. We jumped to the median, and immediately we were surrounded by kids, like urchins. And they were pawing at us and yelling, and we were freaked out. At 20 years old, I started swinging my bag around just to clear space, and Mara was crying. And luckily, a taxi driver swooped up and said, what's wrong? What do you need? Manila Hotel as fast as you can. And we jumped in this little car that looked like this, and at top speed, raced to the Manila Hotel. There was the bag right next to the furniture that was the same color. We grabbed it, got back in. 100 pesos to the airport. I'll give you 150 if you can do it in 20 minutes. And that thing just about melted. He got it to top speed, and it was rattling and shaking. But we made it to the airport, but the trip wasn't over. We got there, we got to the counter, and everybody was there, and we all were paying our departure fee, 20 pesos. And all 9 of us, we were just like, they're going to close the gate in minutes. But they wouldn't let us on. And we all went, no, you need to pay your departure fee. And we went, I paid. We all paid. We knew we paid. And Dennis, thankfully, said, oh, you just need more. Okay, here's 20 pesos, and boom, we made it. And we got out of the Philippines. Whew. Oh, my gosh. What an incredible adventure. Okay. So there's my story about the Pan Am China Clipper trip. And now, since we have 2 more hours of my talk to go, I want to take you on a little journey. And this is the 100th anniversary of my grandfather's flight across the Atlantic, which changed the way the world thought about aviation and opened it up for commercial purposes. This is an opportunity for us to not only share the spirit of St. Louis with the world. I'm going to skip this video.
Almost 100 years ago.
Thank you. We don't have 2 hours. Many of you know that my grandfather flew across the Atlantic to win a prize, right? $25,000. A guy named Raymond Ortiz, who owned a hotel or 2 hotels in New York, put up this prize to encourage tourism. And it took 9 years to win, or 7 years to win. He's put it up in 1919, and in 2027 it was won. My grandfather thought he could win that prize with a modern aircraft. He was flying the mail between the cities of St. Louis and Chicago in an old de Havilland surplus war airplane. And so he gathered his contacts in St. Louis, and he put his life savings together, and between them, they purchased the Spirit of St. Louis and called it the Spirit of St. Louis, which was arguably the best marketing exercise in history, as the world was just newly connected by radio around the globe. Of course, he flew across the northern route, and an interesting thing happened. He was successful, and within 2 years, the number of airline tickets went up 30 times. It shifted the world's perspective about what aviation could do. There were other stats too, but I'll keep going. This is a heat map of today's flights. And skip forward to 1991, Greg Marinac gave Peter Diamandis a copy of my grandfather's book, The Spirit of St. Louis. And I can't tell you how many people my grandfather inspired with his flights, or my grandmother inspired with her flights and her books. But the Spirit of St. Louis book has inspired countless people. This is an extraordinary one. Peter was a frustrated astronaut wannabe, and he realized, that's how I'm going to go to space. I'm going to do a prize. And so he gathered a Lindbergh. I was a little older and a little wiser by then. And in 1996, I went to gather under the arch in St. Louis with 20 astronauts and the head of NASA, and we announced the new X Prize. $10 million would be awarded to the first privately funded manned space program that could take 3 people into space, return safely, and do it again within 2 weeks, showing it was renewable, it was reusable. We probably should have failed. In fact, it was an incredibly difficult thing to do. We didn't have the $10 million. Yeah, that's another story. But every board member stepped in at a different time to save the organization, and we survived for 9 years. What I did was I retraced my grandfather's flights in a small single-engine aircraft we called the New Spirit of St. Louis, and flew it from San Diego to St. Louis to New York, and New York to Paris, raising a couple $1 million for the X Prize and 500 million media impressions. That's before social media. All focused on the future of flight, and it worked. We kept it alive. And in 2004, we were able to give the largest cash prize in history, $10 million at the time, in front of the St. Louis Science Center to the creator of Spaceship One, and backed by Paul Allen from here in Seattle. And we jump-started the private spaceflight industry. Now Musk, Bezos, and Branson are trying to sell you tickets for your CubeSats or your warm bodies. It's pretty extraordinary to know that we had a hand in getting, Spaceship One hanging in the Air and Space Museum next to my grandfather's plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. And it empowered all of us. Since then, the X Prize has given $600 million in incentive prizes trying to solve the grand challenges facing humanity. So this is work that gives me hope for the future and the future generations. So my grandparents, spurred on by Juan Trippe and Pan Am, took this flight of a Lockheed Sirius on floats north to the Orient. My grandmother wrote the award-winning book called North to the Orient. And it is an extraordinary read. It's still in print. You can buy it today. I recommend it highly. It's extraordinary what they did in 1931. They were some of the first people to cross the globe and chart those routes that we still use today. And what they did was fly over large swaths of the earth. And then they saw in later years, that this technology that could connect us could also harm our quality of life or harm the biosphere. And that led to this ethos of balance and this question about humanity and technology. So that was the genesis of, come on, maybe flip that slide for me, thank you, of the Lindbergh Foundation. After my grandfather died, friends of his, Neil Armstrong, General Jimmy Doolittle, Jim Lovell, the astronauts, got together at the Explorers Club and implored my grandmother to create the foundation to work on that balance between advancing technology and preservation of our biosphere. We need to take care of our civilization's needs, but we absolutely need to keep this Earth habitable for the future. So that was the beginning of the foundation, and come on, there we go. We've given over $3 million in grants to visionaries working on that balance concept. We've given awards and electric aircraft prizes, and we continue to do that today. We have education programs. Click. We have started a new Spirit of St. Louis 100 organization to help us move into the 100th anniversary, because we see this as an incredible lever with which we can create positive change. I did it on the 75th. We can do it on the 100th. We'll have the world's eyeballs looking at us. And so we've started to gather the world's visionaries, entrepreneurs, and forward thinkers to help us understand what exactly should we use that lever for. I guess I should mention Dennis Muhlenberg, former CEO of Boeing, and John McDonald of McDonnell Douglas, and others have been helping us with this, and they see this huge opportunity. We also have an Epic STEM Challenge program where kids build electric airplanes with $20 worth of parts, fly them on a tether, and compete to carry different challenges. Super exciting, and we want to do that at the Paris Air Show in 2027. We have a pathway to do that. Come on. There we go. Prince Albert II of Monaco has been a champion of ours and helped us. And I want to say Prince Albert is in the middle in that photo. Next to him, does anyone recognize who's in that photo? Max! Max Gurney, our dear friend who has turned 104 years young this year, fell and broke some ribs. He is hopefully checking out of the hospital soon. Apparently he's doing really well, so he sends his best regards to all of you. Yes, to Max. So with Max backing us, what could go wrong? We have some extraordinary programs that we've done, including the Lindbergh Innovation Forums, where we bring bleeding edge technologies together and have investors and TED-style talks, creating an ecosystem for new entrepreneurial businesses. And my favorite, this event we did at Aero Friedrichshafen, which we're looking to do again, called First Families of Flight, where we brought Wolfgang von Zeppelin of the Zeppelin family, and Cornelius Dornier of the flying boat fame, and other descendants like Sergei Sikorsky. And hosted by Prince Albert, we brought students in from Monaco and Germany and the US, all to focus on electric aircraft. You can see a theme going here. I'm very interested in electric aircraft. And it was extraordinary to be a part of a small team of people that changed the way the world thinks about spaceflight. How do we do that again? So what we're looking, imagine what a city could do, what our whole country, what the world could do if we looked at the 100th as an opportunity to create extraordinary leverage for the future. Just like we did with X Prize, just like my grandfather did with the Ortig Prize. The crux of our civilization right now is how do we power civilization with energy while protecting the Earth? We're using even more energy now that we've got AI on all of our phones and we're all using it. And so we're wondering, can we change the energy equation? And if so, how do we do that? We think that an X Prize is ideally suited to this. So we partnered with the X Prize Foundation, and we're looking at several large incentive prizes that we can announce on the 100th anniversary or leading up to the 100th anniversary. One is potentially space-based solar power prize, which would gather solar power and beam it down to the Earth. I know it sounds crazy, but it's technically feasible. Now we have low-cost, reusable launch vehicles. So we're looking at that very seriously. We're looking at a sustainable aviation fuels prize because aviation is one of the hardest industries to decarbonize. And I guess I don't need these glasses anymore. And we need it. It's one of the threats that we're facing in the industry because governments and people may want to shut us down because we're using more than our fair share of the fossil fuels, when aviation is ideal for fossil fuels, high energy, low mass fuel. So that's something we're very seriously looking at. How do we amplify the 100th anniversary to create something that will lead us into the next century of efficiency? We have tremendous momentum. The governor of Missouri and tremendous champions that we're gathering right now. We moved our headquarters to St. Louis because of the spirit of St. Louis. We even met with FAA Secretary of transportation? No, he's the head. Yeah, Sean Duffy, who's now head of NASA as well. He's super interested. So I think it's just incredibly important that we use these moments to take our history and leverage them for the future generations, just like our grandparents, our parents, you guys have done for this generation. We need to do that for the next generation. Come on. So we envision a charter flight like you guys heard about, where we're gathering the world's entrepreneurs and visionaries and celebrities that fly, and astronauts and politicians, all to focus on the 100th anniversary and gather on Liberty Island. The Statue of Liberty was a gift from France. And then we'll board an eVTOL, electric aircraft, to take off and fly to JFK. And we'll board on the day before the opening of the Paris Air Show. We'll fly over there, land at the Paris Air Show, and announce to the world the prize that we're going to challenge all these entrepreneurs, companies, and people to solve. We see that as being the leverage that we need, and we'll do that at the Eiffel Tower, which was also created by Gustav Eiffel. There's more to it, but I'm sort of trying to hurry so we can all get to dessert. Or the actual dinner part, I guess. I could eat this later. So imagine that journey. We would love to have you on board as we fly from Liberty Island to Paris, to land at the Paris Air Show. We would love to do it with our Pan Am peeps. Okay, come on. I can do it. And I want you to save the date. Ready? May 21. What was May 21? The anniversary of my grandfather's flight. So next year, we're going to focus on my grandmother and women in aerospace. So we're going to have a, yes, very accomplished women in aerospace giving awards to emerging entrepreneurs and visionaries, women in aerospace, and students. So we very much want to leverage my grandfather's history, but really focus on my grandmother because she was so extraordinary and the true heroine of the family. So May 21, 2026, and I hope you will all join us. We have an opportunity to take this history that we have, that the pathfinders of yesterday blazed for us, and create the future for our children and their children in the future. I hope you'll join us. Thank you.